Alrighty, we're back. It's the first episode post the NBA draft. This is the HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball inside and out, and the NBA draft inside and out. And I am Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. Today we're recording live from our studio in Hackettstown, New Jersey. It's very smoky outside. And I am joined by Jake Copestick. Jake, is it smoky in Philly as well?
It was a little hazy today. Apparently, the air quality is still bad to the point where you shouldn't go outside. But I mean, you can see blue in the sky. I saw some clouds today, but it's still hazy. I haven't walked outside to see if you can smell smoke yet, but it's still a little hazier.
I can't smell smoke, and I can definitely see the blue in the sky. So it's not nearly as bad as it was, a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, I can definitely feel it in my lungs. I've been, when I woke up today, I was like, well, why am I all like congested? I feel like I smoked a pack of cigarettes last night. And then I found out the smoke was back. All right. So Jake and I are going to start off this episode, which is going to be focused on the NBA draft grades, but we're starting off this episode, just he and I, on the college notebook, and then we'll move on to our NBA draft grades. So starting off the notebook, you just sent me a text from I guess it was a tweet from Jeff Goodman. And saying that, behind the scenes, I don't know why this stuff is secret. I don't know why this isn't mainstream news. But apparently behind the scenes, second-time waivers are being denied for transfers. Second-time transfers are being denied waivers in most, if not at least many cases. We talked to Mike DeCourcy about this, I don't know, a few months ago. And he was saying, the waiver process is just a formality at this point. Nobody cares. Well, apparently that's changed. What are your thoughts here? Do you know any more than what Goodman sent out, which was kind of brief?
Well, I can drop like what was quoted here first to, I guess, give everybody a better understanding. So it was quoted in Jeff Goodman's tweet that the Division I Council was informed that the overwhelming, in quote, overwhelming majority of the second-time undergrad transfers thus far have been denied waivers. There were exceptions, but minimal. Many of them that have been ruled on thus far were football, but it doesn't bode well for those trying in basketball. So, I mean, it's kind of been open season last year or two. And DeCourcy was absolutely right. It just seemed like it was a formality and you had to go through the process, but you knew that you could just jump to wherever you wanted to go. They're going to, I guess, restrict that a little bit now. We're going to talk about Javon Quinerly and Jordan Brown in a minute here. And although they're grad transfers who aren't going to be penalized at all for this, it's almost July and they decided to leave their respective programs and put them in a bad spot. Like, I don't think this is good for college basketball at all that people can leave this late.
Yeah.
I think you need to set a hard deadline for, and the problem is with those two guys you just mentioned, they're both grad transfers. So I can say that, you can set like a hard deadline for when undergrad transfers can leave. But then the same thing happened with Cam Spencer. Like, he's not going to get penalized, and he left late. So I don't really know what the solution is here. I guess
Spencer was a second-time transfer.
Yeah, but he's a grad transfer, so it doesn't It doesn't apply to any of them.
Right.
So maybe that this helps restrict as much movement as you have. The fact that if they set a precedent now in future years, you'll have to, just like the old transfer rule was, you had to sit out a year. Maybe that deters some people from doing that and maybe want to stick it out in the situation. It just seemed weird that like this was when they decided to put their foot down, and everybody, I bet a lot of players hopped in the portal like not knowing this would happen.
Right.
So I would imagine a lot of people are upset. Like, I was looking through there's a master sheet. I think Andrew Schultz tweeted out. I want to give him a shout out because he's got an Excel spreadsheet. Andrew Parrish is his name. Got a whole spreadsheet, a scholarship tracker for every single school, and it's great. And he's got like stars next to two-time guys if they can get a waiver or not. But one team I was looking at was Cincinnati, and they brought in two transfer big guys in Jamil Reynolds from Temple, who did a year at UCF, left for Temple. Aaron McKee gets fired. He jumped ship to Cincinnati. and Aziz Bandaogo from Utah Valley, who leaves because his coach, Mark Madsen, left for Cal, but he left Akron the year before. So he's also a two-time transfer. But one of them, in both cases for those guys, were that their coach got fired, or there was a coaching.
What about Burnett at Michigan?
I think he's good because he's a grad transfer. I'll look it up to make sure, but I think he graduated from Alabama.
I didn't know. I thought he was a junior this year.
No, he's got a red shirt there with an injury. I guess he falls in that category then, and I don't know if I think we're gonna find out in very soon who's what the ramifications of this.
Quinterly's a second-time transfer, but he's a graduate, right?
Yeah, and so is Jordan Brown. Even though Jordan Brown will be on his fourth school at Memphis.
Right.
So I don't know. Like, we're gonna find out. And it sounds like there's a lot of guys here that are going to get waivers denied. So the rosters that
but just about everybody we know who's significant is already on a team for the most part, except for maybe like a handful of guys. But most of the significant guys are already on a team.
Right, and these undergrad guys that are leaving West Virginia, I mean, Tucson, this doesn't apply to any of them because none of them have transferred before in Tucson to grad transfer. But like special cases like that, you need a waiver.
Right. Okay. On one hand, you could say, well, these rules were always there, and now, they're just enforcing them. But on the other hand, if you're going to enforce them, shouldn't you make it clear to everybody, before the portal opens? Because you hadn't been enforcing them. It's kind of like a ref who lets the calls go up until the last, 5 minutes of the game, and all of a sudden starts calling fouls. That he wasn't calling all game,
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. If they did this if they announced that this would go into effect next year, I think I'd be okay with it. But if you're going to deny was this the biggest amount of people in the portal that we've ever had? Correct? Like 1,700 guys or something in the portal?
Oh, it was definitely over 1,700, closing in on 1,800.
Right. So now you're deciding to restrict it when you have the most people ever in the transfer portal. Like, this doesn't seem right.
Right. No, I agree. If you're going to do it, you should have made it clear next year we're doing it. Period. Mm-hmm. This year is the last open season year, but it kind of goes both ways. With guys like Quinterly, we'll just talk about Quinterly right now, and we'll instead of saving him for later, but. Of course, Javon Quinterly, I'm not a huge fan of his for different things that he's done throughout his career on and off the court. But at the same time, he actually, there was rumors going back in the spring. I mean, like early spring, that he was going to transfer. And then instead, we never saw his name go in the portal. We just saw him declare for the draft, which we were all like, yeah, that's not happening. And so then he had the option to go pro, play in the G League, play in Europe, or at the same time, so he drug it out all the way to the end and then said, I'm coming back to, school. And that was Alabama. And then just this week, he announces he's leaving Alabama. Now, so my point is, on one hand, you're right. It does screw teams like Rutgers to lose players, late in the process. But on the other hand, there's schools like Alabama that continue to bring in player after player, and everybody goes in the portal. Alabama's after. You see it, Alabama's pursuing this guy. Alabama's pursuing this guy. So if you're Quinterly, a super senior, and you're like, shit, why am I here? I may not even get to play, because he keeps on adding players. So on some level, what I'm saying is it cuts both ways. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think maybe the process, should be limited for both teams and players up until a point. So the players know what they're getting into, what kind of situation they're going to, and so the teams know what kind of team they're going to have. So,
right.
All right.
Exactly.
All right, so we'll move on to our second topic of in the notebook is West Virginia, and I'm going to let you run with this, Jake. You've been on top of this situation since the get-go. Apparently, Bob Huggins is a good drinking buddy of yours. Come on now, don't tell me you wouldn't pay good money to go out drinking one night with Bob Huggins.
Yeah, I'd like to crack a beer with him for sure. He's at the top of the list of guys I'd like to crack a beer with in college basketball. And I don't mean that in any way. Prior to this incident, I would have told you the same thing.
Right.
He just seemed like an awesome on the earth.
Yeah.
So,
well, because if you went out for a beer with him, you get some straight answers and some interesting takes on things.
I'll let you be the judge of that.
Well, then you had to have a reason why you wanted to drink a beer with him.
Seems like an old school, laid back guy. I would have said that pre-incident.
Right.
But I don't mean to make a joke about the incident about that.
Right. I'm not talking about what he said, Xavier. I'm not looking for quotes like that. I wouldn't be interested in hearing stuff like that. But what I would like is straight, honest answers. Mm-hmm. And he seems like a guy who has his opinions, and he's going to tell you his opinion. And that's why I'd want to have a beer with him. So that's
100%. Exactly my reasoning as well. But his replacement, Josh Eilert, he's going to be the interim head coach. There was some discussion about Ren Baker, the AD at West Virginia, saying that he wanted a long-term fix and he didn't want to hire an interim. Well, it's almost July. Your options are limited. I don't think any head coach right now would want to leave a team that they've pretty much already constructed to go to West Virginia. And although you probably get some long-term job security and a lot of money, who do you have year one? You're not going to really I doubt you'll get guys from your school to transfer because then they might get denied waivers and maybe it's too late. So they had to roll with an interim here. So they hired Josh Eilert. He's been at West Virginia since 2007 in various roles: a video coordinator, director of basketball operations, an assistant coach, and even an assistant athletics director for basketball operations. Been an assistant coach now for a few years. So he's going to get the job. Been there a long time. Going to get a shot here to be a head coach at a place he knows really well. And he got two big-time transfers to stay. He got Kirk Risa from Arizona and Raekwon Battle from Montana State to stay. However, Joe Toussaint, who's a grad transfer, Mohamed Wag, and James Okonkwo, all out the door. I hope I said Mohamed's last name right. I hope I did. If I was wrong, please correct me. But those three guys are in the portal. Joe Toussaint says he's still considering a return to West Virginia. He actually graduated, so he's and as you know, as a grad transfer, of course, anyway. But he's got his degree there from there now. He's eligible anywhere next season. This waiver thing we discussed does not apply to him. He visited Kansas State and Texas Tech this week. Plans to take a day trip to Alabama soon, and a Zoom call set up with Gonzaga and Miami, and is also pondering a visit to Nebraska. I have to give Mr. Rothstein a plug there for all that.
Okay.
And then Mohamed Wag to visit DePaul. He did that on Tuesday. And then he's going to visit Kansas State. I'm sure Jerome Tang's probably trying to get him and Toussaint on campus both at the same time, hoping to bag both of them. And then Alabama recently joined the mix for its services as well. And then James Okonkwo, actually hearing from some really big-time programs, a young guy. UConn.
Oh, no, I'm laughing. I'm laughing at Alabama. They're having an arms race with Arkansas.
Yeah.
They go after everybody. Anybody.
Yeah, Arkansas's name is. You'd think Arkansas is fielding a college football team. They're in so many guys. But hey, James Okonkwo, pretty big names here. Pretty big names here that are after him. UConn, the defending champs. North Carolina, Texas A&M, Seton Hall, Mississippi State, who brought in Jimmy Bell and brought in another West Virginia guy this year, and VCU, among others. Shout out to the portal report for that. So. Seems like Toussaint's the only guy that's considering a return to West Virginia. Seems like the other two guys are out the door, especially Okonkwo. So potential for them to get Toussaint back. He is like the ultimate West Virginia guard to me, just a little pest. A smaller guard who's going to be able to slide with him, just be a pest defensively, knock down a shot here and there. But for having five guys enter the portal, as long as you can keep Jesse Edwards too, I'd say things can definitely be a lot worse for West Virginia.
Right. So now we'll move on to the other transfer portal developments and rumors. We mentioned Quinterly Apparently, Memphis is the front runner to bring him in.
Yeah. So obviously with Kendrick Davis leaving, they're going to need a point guard. So they brought in Jonathan Pierre, who of course we interviewed. They brought in Nick Jourdain from Temple, who can be a small ball five. But another thing that they're missing, and of course they're still waiting on a potential waiver for DeAndre Williams, who could come back.
Right.
But they also brought in David Jones from St. John's. He is going to very likely need a waiver coming from DePaul and being a two-time transfer now. And they got Caleb Mills from Florida State, who is also going to need a waiver because he is a two-time transfer if this rule is what they say it is. But they need a point guard to replace Kendrick Davis. There's a perfect guy for it. The perfect guy for it, a fifth year who can score, can handle the ball for a really, really exciting player. And they for sure need another ball handler. And when you go to Memphis, you're probably going to get some coin to go there. And if you want to learn from a point guard, a guy who played the NBA, did pretty well for himself, I'd say Penny Hardaway's not a bad guy to go and play for. So this seems like it's going to happen. I think it's only a matter of time. I think by maybe there's no announcement now. It's the holiday weekend, but I'd say next week I think this is done and Javon Quinterly's going there. I've already set in my mind.
Right. And the aforementioned Jordan Brown is going to Memphis, fourth team in 5 years.
Yeah, that's correct. So he had to sit when he transferred from Nevada to Arizona. Did 2 years at Arizona, 2 years at 1 year at Arizona after the transfer to Louisiana. And then, he's going to go to Memphis. And they have a bit of a hole at center because Malcolm Dandridge is in the portal.
Mm-hmm.
I think he might have had an offer to go to St. Louis or maybe committed and then decommitted or something like that. St. Louis had a transfer center that committed there and then decommitted very quickly. But he has the option to he has the option to potentially come back, but that spot's filled now. So who knows if there's going to be any time for Malcolm Dandridge there, but fills a hole in the middle for Memphis. So big gets for, Javon Quinterly's not a get just yet, but if this happens, that's two damn good starters who are some of the best players in their conference, to add to your team and your starting lineup this late in the portal. And they're going to be right back up there in the, as far as the best teams. They won the AAC tournament last year with all the teams departing. Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, they could potentially run away with this conference. And like I've said multiple times about this Memphis team, the AAC shaping up like it could be that first round game of FAU in Memphis.
Before we move on, I tried to get clarification on DeAndre Williams just before the draft because I knew he had put in for the waiver. I knew that there hadn't been a ruling on the waiver, not to my knowledge. So I tried to reach out to some local reporters in Memphis. Nobody either got back to me or gave me a clear answer. And so now it makes me wonder what just transpired last Thursday. What was DeAndre Williams in that draft? I would say technically he was, because he was, according to the NBA, he's out of eligibility, and the fact that he put in the waiver, it doesn't really matter to them unless he got it, And so since he didn't have it at the time, I think he was already in the draft. But I haven't been able to get a clarification. And of course, the NBA is not going to answer a question. They'll be like, who the hell is DeAndre Williams? And given that DeAndre Williams is going to be 27 years old, you have to question his decision because, okay, yeah, maybe he's getting a few $100,000 in NIL, but I don't think he's going to be eligible for next year's draft, but he wouldn't be drafted anyway because he's so old. Mm-hmm. But he's making, if he loses that waiver, he's dragging it out. Right now, international teams are signing players, and their season's going to start in September. And the G League, and okay, well, those teams are still, figuring things out. But the NBA is, in terms of two-way contracts and Exhibit 10s, they're filling out all those slots. So he's probably going to miss that boat. So his options are going to he's probably going to have one option if he loses the waiver. And that one option will be a part of the G League draft, which I think takes place in September. And then you don't get any money. You just get to try out, or minimal money. I mean, minimal. And you get to try out for a G League team. And if you stick, then you get a G League contract, which is only going to add up to $40,000. So, yeah. But do you have any more insight on DeAndre Williams?
I haven't seen him on a summer league roster signed to an undrafted deal yet, at least to my knowledge, which, makes me think that maybe he gets it. I don't know. I mean, this is like, I can't think of anything like this that's happened. I know is the one guy's name DeJuan Clayton, I think, going to California or transferring out of California. He's like 26 and got another year. Like, with the whole COVID situation, like, I don't think the NCAA has ever like seen something like this. And even with a red shirt or a transfer or an injury, like, he might have another year left, but he's also going to be 27.
He had to sit out. What he's arguing is he had to sit out 1 year because of grades. All right. And he's saying he still owed one more year. And I'm thinking, I don't know. I mean, if that was the rules, you have to sit out because of grades, and that kind of counts towards your eligibility nonetheless, then a rule's a rule,
Right.
All right, so we'll move on. Trey Mitchell has transferred to Kentucky, and to me, this is not a good move by Trey Mitchell. He started off at UMass, then help me out here. He went to Texas for a year. Then he played at West Virginia last year. So now he's going to his fourth school. So not only is he bouncing around, but what I see from these guys who have experience and are good players at Kentucky, they never, ever get any traction in the draft. Who was the huge kid from Stanford who transferred into Kentucky, had a really good, graduate season?
Reed Travis.
Yeah. Yeah, Reed Travis, and you can name other guys. I mean, Shigwe's about the only veteran to ever transfer into Kentucky. And even then, he had only played one season at West Virginia. He was still relatively young. So, I don't know. You don't know what kind of playing time you're going to get at Kentucky. You're going to probably be yanked in and out of the lineup. Why not stay at West Virginia where you're going to get 30 minutes a night?
Well, is he going to have to play behind Jesse Edwards?
No, he's a 4. He's a 4. He can play the 4.
Well, I would think this is a move to slide him in there in Shigwe's spot. Like, I think he can play at an SEC school, and he's gonna get a lot of playing time. I think this is a move to bring in a 5th-year guy that's gonna slide in to Shigwe's spot. Like, I think he's gonna get the time.
Yeah, well, he's not Shigwe. And yeah, all right. Well, I'm just not excited about it for him. Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah.
I think he's going to play. I think Calipari.
Well, yeah, he'll play, but he's
going to be a starter.
But I mean, playing next to Edwards and Mitchell and the other new guys, I mean, they would have a nice starting 5.
Well, I take that back. I think Aaron Bradshaw will be healthy, and if they're going to roll with the youth movement here with all the guys you're talking about.
Well, you don't know about Bradshaw. We'll talk about him later.
Yeah, we'll talk about him later. Yeah.
I added him to the bottom, but we can talk about Bradshaw now. We had in our other happenings that Bradshaw he's a top 5 recruit coming in this year. So top 5 guy, suffered a broken foot, and he's likely out till September. Now, we saw what happened with Whitfield this year at Duke. With Jariq Whitehead, Jariq Whitehead. We know that foot injuries aren't necessarily, it's not like a broken hand. Broken hand, you could probably, expect to be back in action 8 weeks, probably no issues. Broken foot, that's a different story.
So here's the thing I actually put in here because it's kind of been disputed if he's actually hurt or not. So he was in an Instagram live, and Tristan Ferris from Kentucky Insider to Sea of Blue reported that he said in that IG live he'd only be out 3 to 6 weeks. They're going on an international trip. He's not going to play in that, but he should be ready to go by the season. I was very confused when I first saw this because I would have heard something concrete or something from the school, but it looked like he's been working out. And according to this IG live, he said he was only going to be out 3 to 6 weeks. So I
Right.
think he'll be
Well,
ready for the season based
a
on.
broken bone will set in 2 weeks. Typically, sometimes you can be ready to go in 6 weeks, but that's usually with non-weight bearing bones. Bones that aren't going to be weight bearing all the time. And in his case, he's going to be jumping up and down.
Right.
So that's why I think 3 weeks. Yeah, he'll probably be able to walk in 3 weeks. Now we're assuming the incident happened very recently, right?
Apparently, it happened in the All-American game, the McDonald's All-American game.
Oh, well, that's a long time ago, right?
Yeah. So he said. So they're getting ready to go to Canada for a summer trip, but he's not going to play.
Right.
But he said that he expects to be back in 3 to 6 weeks. This article came out a week ago today, literally almost about a week ago today.
All right, so he should be okay then. Yeah, I would think. Yeah,
which is another wrinkle to the Trey Mitchell thing because like he's a legit 7-footer, Aaron Bradshaw, and like I said, if they're gonna roll with DJ Wagner, they're gonna roll with Justin Edwards, all of which I have to kind of toot the horn of Philadelphia because they're all local guys in Camden and in Philly.
Yeah,
throw that out there. But that could throw a little wrinkle in Trey Mitchell's playing time. But also, and forgive me, what's the young guy in Kentucky's bench who like backed up Lance Ware, was like the third stringer. I think got a little bit of time.
Yeah, no, he was ultra impressive. Ghana Onyensu.
Yes,
and Onyensu is very skinny, 6'11", but man, he have quick feet. He's a tremendous shot blocker. I was ultra impressed. He played like maybe the first 10 games of the season, and then when Shigwe got totally healthy, he was pushed out of the rotation. But Onyensu, I mean, he reminded me of Derek Lively, and I just couldn't believe how quick this guy was. So I'm really a big believer in him. The question is, can he bang in the SEC yet? Will he ever be able to bang, from a pro perspective? But yeah. All right. So moving on, staying with Kentucky, Antonio Reeves is back. Apparently he had moved out of his apartment, or people thought he was moving out of his apartment or something like that. And then Booney came on the show. I wasn't sure what his source was, but said he was going back to Illinois State. And I was like, what?
I saw that too. Apparently he was taking classes there. The rumor was he was back at Illinois State taking classes there. That was
okay.
Yeah. Weird story.
Yeah.
Weird story.
And so what do you got? I mean, obviously Reeves is a really good shooter. I think he has outside pro potential. So any takes here?
Well, look, they need experience. That's the bottom line. And to have a guy come back, average over 14 points a game. And how about this? After moving up from Illinois State, shot a career best 39.8% from three, almost hitting 40%. However, he did not shoot that against Kansas State in the round of 32 in the tournament. Went 1 for 15, 1 of 10 from three, and at 5 points. But they needed experience. They needed a guy. Like I hate to keep beating the dead horse here, but that's what they needed. They're coming in with so much youth. They needed some experience, and to get him an experience,
and they needed that somebody could make shots.
Exactly. With CJ Frederick out of the fold too, they needed a shoot. They just needed a steady shooter on the wing, and they're going to get it back with Reeves.
All right. So we'll go over some of the other items on the list and comment here. These are probably not big movers or shakers in the big scheme of things, but Devin Cambridge, who's Desmond Cambridge's younger brother. They both played last year for Arizona State. Desmond Cambridge Jr. was in the draft, went undrafted, but he's probably one of the better unsigned free agents at this point. And his younger brother, Devin, was going to Oregon. Now he's going to Texas Tech. He's like his brothers. He's athletic, but probably not as good a shooter and ball handler as his older brother. Jemiah Williams, who we talked about recently, decommits from Illinois. He started at Temple, then he sat out last year due to injuries at Iowa State, and now not sure where he's going. Have any thoughts on Cambridge or Williams?
Yeah, I think Cambridge is interesting. What happened was Deshaun Jackson, who transferred in from Charlotte, he went back and he went to Texas Tech from Charlotte. He reverted back. So it's, a spot opened up and needed a guy who's going to come in, played a couple years in college, good athlete, can block some shots for a 6'6" guy, superb like dunker, who's gonna be a threat in the dunker spot off some penetration. So I like Grant McCaslin. I think he's actually got a pretty solid team for next year that's going to be competitive day one. I don't think he's a grad transfer. He might. Is he? Regardless,
I think this will be his super senior year.
Okay, so he's not going to need the waiver, but my guy Jeremiah Williams from Temple probably will. I mean, got hurt last year. I don't think they can hold that against him. I think he actually might get the waiver, considering that he transferred, but he didn't play last year due to injury. So hopefully he gets something. But he's got a visit with Rutgers. He's got one with San Jose State as well.
Oh.
Maybe go play for Tim Miles.
Right. All right, couple more items. Chandler Lawson, who we talked about not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, from Memphis, is heading to Arkansas. And as Jake said, they now have a roster longer than their football team, the basketball team does. And
they still have a spot left, if you can believe that.
No, I can't.
Yeah, because I saw.
Well, they pretty much brought in all those 4 or 5 star freshmen, and all those guys are gone, as far as I know. They either went into the draft or went somewhere else.
Yeah, so they have a lot of space open. I think that last spot, not to cut you off, Southern Miss, and New Mexico State commit for Denijay Harris is reopening his commitment. He transferred to New Mexico State to play for Jason Hooten. He decommitted, and Trilly Donovan tweets out "Woo Pig," and he quote tweeted it with "SUNY" with an N in the middle. So it sounds like that final spot's done.
Okay. All right. Zach Clements, who we were excited to go see him play at US Santa Barbara. UC Santa Barbara. We talked about that a while back, and apparently he didn't like what he saw at Santa Barbara. He's leaving. He's returning to Kansas, but he's going to redshirt. So this is after 2 years of not playing much. This is a former 4-star guy. He's played decently when he's gotten a chance, but he really hasn't gotten much of a chance, and now he's going to sit out another year. Go figure. All right, so I think the last thing we need to talk about is New Mexico State, and for me, this is really weird news. So you read it off and try to make sense of this for me.
Yeah, so obviously the New Mexico State Aggies were a disaster last year after having Chris Jans, who was very stable, getting into tournaments, having a lot of success in the WAC. Greg Heyer took over, total disaster. There was the gun incident where Mike Peake was shot
and killed,
and then he shot and killed somebody out of self-defense. He did not. He got a bullet. He was shot, but
he brought a gun to go.
Yes.
Yeah. So
They went up to Albuquerque to play New Mexico, and they had to cancel the game because of the incident that had happened the night before. And then if it gets any worse, and then there was the whole story about how they tried to hide the gun, hide the evidence. It got worse when there was a hazing incident that we've covered before. They shut the season down. Some people were getting charged higher. Assistant coach Dominique Taylor and a couple former players, Dr. Bradley being one of them, who I believe committed to Eastern Illinois. And they were all named in this case, and were looking to be charged. So New Mexico State reached a settlement with Deuce Benjamin, his father William Benjamin, and Shakiru Odenuwu. The terms of this settlement had not been released, but essentially this is resolved. And I say essentially because the Attorney General's office is still investigating for potential criminal charges. But Greg Heyer's lawyers came out with a statement that, he's kind of been absolved of everything legally, and he's looking forward to getting back into coaching. So I don't think we're at the end, because it sounds like it's still an ongoing investigation, but it seems like Greg Heyer is no longer needed as of the moment.
So now, are we to assume that Benjamin and Shakiru, how do you say that? Odenuwu were the victims of the hazing?
Yes, that's why they were that they had the settlement agreed with. It was Deuce Benjamin and Odenuwu that were apparently the targets of the hazing, and then Deuce Benjamin's father William kind of stepped in and helped bring it to the forefront. He was one of the people that was pressing charges, being the father of one of the players.
Right. And how is anyone in their right mind think that Greg Heyer is not at least on some level responsible.
That's what I think. But apparently, it was named in the case that he never got to tell his version of events, and I guess that created a little bit of doubt that maybe he was innocent somehow. But I think he's got to be responsible in some way. And like, this wasn't the first mishap of the year where it was like, oh, like we just kept a blind eye or something like that, or oh, we didn't see.
Here's the thing: it wasn't isolated incidences. Apparently, it happened multiple times in front of the entire team.
Yeah,
that's something that's really tough to keep secret. You really have to be an ostrich with your head buried deep in the sand, not to somehow get a sense of something like is going wrong. I mean, you really have to have your head deep in the sand not to know something's going wrong.
Yep.
And if Greg Heyer gets another job, I hope to God parents remember that name and don't send their kids to that school.
Agreed. No, I mean, it's not even an issue of basketball. It's an issue of their safety if you're going to send them away somewhere. Right. So who knows? I know he's a JUCO coach originally. Maybe that's where he gets started again. I'm sure he's not getting a D1 job anytime soon.
Right.
He's the head coaching job.
We have one more minor item here. We got like 1 minute to go before we run out of time, before we have to move on. Chris Johnson committed to Texas. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, so he's a 6'4", 180-pound guard from Montverde Academy. He was originally this is basically a trade of Kansas and Texas. Arterio Morris goes to Kansas, and then Chris Johnson, who's already committed there, leaves and goes to Texas. Okay. So a bit of a switch up here, but physical guy.
Where does he rank in the recruiting rankings?
He right now is, I think he's in the 50s, maybe 53.
Okay.
So he's top 100 guy coming in. Right. But he's going to give some positional size to Texas. 2 small point guards, Max Aspis and Tyrese Hunter at 6 feet. You give him a 6'4" guard who's tough, is going to play hard on both ends, and he's going to play. He's going to have the opportunity to play right away. So a good situation for him.
Yeah, very good. All right. That wraps up our college notebook for this week, and now we're going to move on to the NBA draft grades. We now have a full house. We have Drew Barton, we have Cam Rio, we have Jackson Anagi, and we have Jake Copestick, and maybe Doc Llewellyn will join us later. So what we're going to do today is we're basically going to work on our draft grades, though we're also going to have an eye on free agency. So we're going to talk about the undrafted players that were signed. We're also going to be talking about where the teams stand in terms of where they are, what they'll be looking for in free agency. And we're not going to complete these grades, final grades. These are going to be our tentative grades, but we're not going to complete them until next week when we've had a good full week of free agency, and then we're going to give our total offseason grades. So here we go, gentlemen. Obviously, we're trying to grade on a curve, not have too many A's, not to have too many F's, and mostly B's and C's, which would make logic. A lot of times you'll see these draft grades and everybody has an A or a B, and the lowest is like a C. No, we're being realistic here. We're keeping it real, Drew. So, gentlemen, do you have any words before we begin with the Atlanta Hawks?
Yes, really quick. Just for the Warriors, they did officially re-sign Draymond Green to a 4-year, $100 million deal as of 3 minutes ago, it looks like.
Nice, because if you look at their depth charts, it was quite the mess, especially at power forward. They had one player there, and that was Kuminga. All right, great. All right, so it's good to see all you guys. So I'm going to start with Atlanta, and who they drafted was, I'm not going to necessarily say what pick, but they drafted Kobe Buffkin, Muhammad Gay, and Seth Lundy. So 3 picks, and they made 2 trades. To get Gay, they actually traded a 2027 pick to the Celtics. And then after the draft, they sent John Collins to Utah for not much of anything. They got Rudy Gay, who they're supposedly going to be cutting, and a future 2nd-round pick. So they basically gave John Collins away, who was the 19th overall pick, I believe, 6 years ago. Yeah, so in my opinion, the Hawks got. I like Buffkin. I didn't think he was. I thought they took him a little too high. Gay, I thought was a bit of a project, and so to give up a second round pick to get him, I mean, you could say that might turn out to be even, but taking him at 39, I thought was too early. I think he's a project at best. I'm wondering if they're thinking about moving him to power forward, by the way. Not much of a shot blocker, but is, athletic for a big. He's not a big. He's not like Sonogo. He's not like, big and bulky. So maybe he could play at the power forward. He does have somewhat of a jump shot. And then, of course, they picked Lundy at 46, which I thought was their only like spot on pick. I thought they got him. I wouldn't call it a steal, but they probably got him about right where I thought he would go. Definitely one of the better shooters in the draft. Good size, good athlete, and good defender. I know some people have questioned that, but I think at worst he works at it. So yeah. So all in all, if you look at their roster, it's pretty full. And I think it looks pretty solid. However, I would not, expect them to make great strides next year. I think they'll be better than last year, but I think a lot depends on, what Bufkin does, what AJ Griffin does, what Jalen Johnson does, who will probably be starting at the 4, or maybe they're going to think about playing Onyeka Okongwu at the 4, though I doubt it. I think they'll probably give the shot to Johnson. So, the roster looks really talented, but it's also really young. But they do have some, really good players in Trae Young and DeMonte Murray. But for what they've done, especially just giving away Collins for nothing, I have to give them a C-. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree here. I think for me, the Collins pick is what moved them down to that C- out of the C range. I didn't hate their draft. I thought Seth Lundy was a good pick. I wasn't high on Bufkin, but I know he was flying up draft board. So you got him right outside the lottery. And I think Mohamed Gay has some pretty solid potential. He's a West Coast guy, so I've seen him play quite a bit. I definitely think there's potential there. But I think giving Collins away for literally nothing at this point for a second-round pick, I mean, say what you want. The guy averaged almost a double-double. I know he had a finger issue, which was kind of impacting his ability to shoot the ball. But, I mean, throughout his career, he's been a good shooter. I mean, he basically is the prototypical kind of stretch big you want. You gave him away for nothing. This team is banking on all these young guys making strides, and I don't know how confident I am in that. They actually might be worse next year in the hope of long-term growth. I actually see this team being even worse, hoping that in 2 or 3 years they hit their stride.
That's true. A lot's going to depend on Okongwu and Jalen Johnson, whoever they play at the 4 spot. Exactly. Maybe they're going to go real small and play AJ Griffin. He's really a guard. I can't see that. And he's never been known as a great defender. He's mostly known for being a really good shooter. But man, if he comes through and Lundy comes through in spot minutes, you're gonna have a lot of shooters on that team. And and you have Sadiq Bey, who I thought was kind of a steal last year. Maybe he starts at the 4. Maybe that's what they do. Or DeAndre Hunter, some combination of DeAndre Hunter and Bey are the 2 starters, and maybe Jalen Johnson and Griffin back them up. That's another good possibility. So, when you think about that, they had Sadiq Bey was kind of like their 6th man with, Bogdan Bogdanovic. That's pretty nice. So I think they're going to be a playoff team. I think they'll be above 500. And I think, they have a lot of young talent. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, they're really high on Okongwu. I'd look for him, like if you're into fantasy basketball or whatever, look for him to be a guy that has a huge uptick in production and minutes, because they've wanted him to be a starter for a long time.
At the 4?
He could play 4. He's got some mid-range game to him. He's best as a center. So what I would kind of expect for them to maybe look to move off of Capella, start going a little bit younger, a little bit smaller, a little more shooting.
We talked about that in our mock draft. We talked about Capella being possibly moved, and his name has come up a lot in trade rumors. So he may be yet moved. They definitely, in my opinion, I don't know what they've done with Bruno Fernando. He was, they had to make a decision on his team option. So I don't know if they kept it, but I don't think he's the answer as a backup. Maybe, I don't know, or Gay as the backup. So if they move Capella, they're definitely going to want some kind of backup behind Okongwu. But yeah, I could definitely see him starting. All right, so we'll move on. I also had the Boston Celtics. So they only had one pick. And actually, I'm still going to give them a B, and let me explain. You know, they entered the draft with pick 35. They left with pick 38. But in between a lot of moves, which mostly involved trading down, they ended up getting, let me see here. They got 2 first rounders and a total of 6 second rounders plus pick 38, which they used on Jordan Walsh. Now, they also traded away Marcus Smart to Memphis, and that was where they got one of their first-round picks. And they also sent pick 35 to Washington, but they got Kristaps Porzingis and the 2 first-rounders. So the way I look at it with all the draft picks, and they used, by the way, they used 1 first-rounder, basically, to get those 6 second-round picks and Jordan Walsh back. They just kept on trading it down, and each time they traded it down, they got 1 or 2 more picks. So I thought that was rather brilliant. I think Walsh is, I don't know, he's certainly not ready offensively, though he has shown improvement over the course of the year. But I think, you know, as a defender, he definitely could give them some good minutes and help offset the loss of Smart and offset the loss of Grant Williams. Now, he can't do both. But I still think the Celtics bench looks thinner than ever. So maybe I'm being a little generous with a B. What do you guys think?
Rich, I think Brad Stevens is finally sort of putting his stamp on the franchise. I think there for a while, he was just kind of like swimming in Danny Ainge's wake with a pretty filled out roster that was ready. He's made some serious moves, and he's taken, I mean, like you said, he took Smart and 1 first-round pick and turned it into this return. And on top of it, they're getting Walsh, who is a project, but he fits a need that they've had for years. They've never had a guy 6'6 plus that can be a backup option for Brown and for Tatum. And they desperately needed it. I think he's going to be their guy. They can kind of bring him around slowly, start introducing him in spot minutes just to get some depth piece. But I think the Porzingis deal is huge for them. They've got to replace Al Horford's minutes as he gets older. It's a hell of a draft for the Celtics.
Right. Yeah. What I'm thinking about, what you just said about Horford, that's one of my main concerns is the center position. Because Horford is definitely, you know, losing a step. Well, I won't say a whole step, but he's definitely getting a little worse each year. And Robert Williams, you know, can be fantastic, you know, when he's healthy, but that rarely seems to be the case. So that's definitely a concern. Of course, Derek White is probably now going to start at the 1. And last year, he was the real, you know, take on the toughest defensive responsibility. So can he do both? That's a lot to ask. Maybe Brogdon's elbow turns out to be okay. Maybe they play him at the point and still use White as a stopper. You know, I don't know, but I definitely think they have to add a few more pieces. So again, anyone think the B's a little too generous? Or are we good with all these moves that they made to get all those future picks plus KP? And
I think B's solid because I agree with Cam. You get Jordan Walsh, who could be that kind of almost like a mixture of Smart and Williams. Like he has the Williams more like size, but like that Smart grit, defensive versatility. And if you can get the offensive game, so you might end up getting, I don't want to say the best, Marcus Smart turned into a pretty good player, but like a guy who kind of can bridge that gap between both of them. And they walked out with the best player, at least statistically here, with Kristaps Porzingis. So it's like, I think B's fine. You call it the best player and a player that has solid upside that fits a need. Like KP could be an 18-8 kind of guy for this team and still give you a block and a half a night. So
Yeah,
I think you can't go lower than a B for that.
I thought Memphis, gave up too much from Marcus Smart.
Yeah.
All right. So next on the board we have Jake, who has the Brooklyn Nets. Came away with 3 solid picks.
Yeah. So they didn't move. We talked a bunch about trades. This team, they made a trade. They traded Joe Harris to the Pistons today, but besides that, they didn't make any draft night trades. They had 20 and 21. They said with one of them they wanted to take an upside swing. I think they definitely did that. So they got Noah Clowney from Alabama at number 21, which I talked about when I was talking about the Nets, even though I had them taking 2 guards. Yeah, they have Day'Ron Sharpe, they have Claxton. He gives them a stretch big now, which is something that they need. Like they have Finney Smith, but in terms of like a real big that can shoot, now they have one, Noah Clowney. A pick I really like in Dariq Whitehead. I believe that he'll I believe enough in his game that it warrants a pick like that, and especially I think it's a great value there. Even with his injury, his ability that he had in high school when he was actually healthy, when I see that makes me really believe in his game and think it's definitely worth the risk to take Dariq Whitehead. And then at number 51, they got Jalen Wilson, a guy who I think I actually had mocked to the Nets. It was Grizzlies to the Nets, but regardless, he's been a really accomplished player, got really good coaching from Bill Self in college. And you know what you're going to get. Like, I think this is a guy that you can put on the if you trade a Joe Harris or somebody like that and you have a spot open, like you can put a guy like Jalen Wilson who's been in college for a number of years to absorb some minutes on the end of the bench and help you out right away. So I gave the Nets a B. Want to know what you guys think, but I did think it was a very solid draft, even though they didn't move up or down. I thought they did very well for themselves.
Anyone else?
Spot on, Jake. I think that's spot on. I think B is they didn't wow you, but they didn't reach for anybody. Like, I think we're kind of forgetting that this team's still kind of in rebuilding mode. Like, if anyone thinks they're going to contend with Mikal Bridges as their best player and Cam Johnson as probably their second best player, you're delusional. So I think like they're still rebuilding. And these are 3 guys that kind of cross the spectrum. You have like a more veteran player who will probably end up sticking in rotation back into the bench. Whitehead's kind of like that swing in the dark, but if he hits, you might have gotten top 10 potential at 21. And Clowney gives them something that every NBA team is looking for and stretch for. So I think B's spot on for these guys.
Good point on the rebuild, because if whatever team picked Dariq Whitehead, if they were in the middle of a rebuild, I felt like that was the best situation for him. You don't have to rush him back. You're not going to compete right away. You give him as much time as he needs.
Yeah. They're just in a weird spot as a franchise too. Like they kind of need guys that are going to be ready sooner rather than later. Like obviously Whitehead, they've got some wings in house, so they can kind of bring him along slowly. But they've sent out so many of their picks in the Harden deal. As well, really in the Harden deal, they sent so many picks out. That's a team that needs to be good. They're one of the few teams that wants to at least be relevant, not bad. That's still in a rebuild. So for them to get these 3 picks in now is huge, because they can have some young talent while they're kind of stuck in the middle ground of the NBA. It's gonna be huge that they got these 2 guys with high potential.
Yeah, I think they got good value with every pick. I mean, I think they got them a little later than I would have taken them. The 2 concerns I have about Brooklyn right now is if Ben Simmons does't come around, then you're going with Spencer Dinwiddie as your starting point guard. And Dinwiddie is the type of guy I would like to have, being, a 6th man off the bench, as a scorer. And also Clowney is built a lot like Nick Claxton. So you have 2 real slender guys, and we're still waiting to see if Day'Ron Sharpe, who's a huge man, if he's gonna be the real deal. So they really do, to me, Clowney is really more of a 4. So I'm still concerned about center, because Claxton's kind of a tweener. And he can get pushed around, and no one's going to push Sharpe around, but can he do anything else? Besides stand under the basket and rebound? So, one thing I want to say about Clowney is, we have a special metric that we call WAR that I use to help me. Don't use it as the be all end all for my draft rankings, but I use it to help me guide me, and also helps me identify players who might be playing, say, at Southern Mississippi, and I see they have a high WAR, and I'm like, whoa. Now, I will say there's a lot of factors in there that goes into that equation. I mean, the equation's huge. I mean, Einstein might have trouble figuring it out at first. But so sometimes it's hard to figure out, why does a guy have a high WAR? And of course, I can do it ultimately, and I think with Clowney, it was some of his defensive numbers, but he's the only player on our draft board that had a higher WAR than Victor Wembanyama.
Wow.
Yeah. Wembanyama was something like 117.7, and Clowney was something like 118.3. Of course, 100 is excellent, anything over 100. So, yeah, just an interesting number. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on to see if our WAR is worth its salt. All right, so that moves us. We're going in alphabetical order, by the way, folks. That moves us on down to the Charlotte Hornets. Jackson, this is another team that you I believe, controlled in the mock draft, and they were some busy boys. So, what do you got?
Yeah, they had 4 picks this draft. So, at number 2, they took obviously Brendan Miller. I know I talked about a little bit, I think I like Scoot Henderson more as a potential as a prospect, but I think the fit was just better for the Hornets and what they need is immediately. So I think he'll provide immediate help with the shooting and just on the wing. Then at 27, they took Nick Smith Jr., which at 27 I think is really good value here. Obviously, before the season, thought of to be a top 5 talent probably. But had a rough year, struggled with injury. But I think at 27, he is good pick here, and then he has the potential to be a lot more. And if he could put it all together, honestly, a really big steal at the end of the first round. Then at 31, they acquired the 31st pick from the Celtics for the 34th pick and the 39th pick. And here they took James Nanji. So I like Nanji. He's obviously very big, 7'7" wingspan. Has the physical tools as a center, but I don't know about the value. I know 31 is, it's around where we thought, early second, but I know they also took Mark Williams last year at the center position, which I think he provides a lot of the same value in rim protection, rebounding at the center position. And he showed last year that I think he's a keeper and good rebounder, good shot blocker. So I don't really know at 31. I think they could have targeted another shooter or something else to help at their wing. But I still like Nanji and his overall long-term potential, but I don't think he'll be adding anything next year. Obviously, Hornets aren't going to be good anyway, but I don't know. At 31, I think they could have targeted someone else. But then at 41, I like their pick for Amari Bailey. I think that's a good value there. He snuck around. We thought maybe he could be a first-round pick. Former 5-star recruit. Season really picked up after the Jalen Clark injury at UCLA. Saw more time with the ball in his hands. Really a lot of promise as a defender and playmaker. And I think he tried to showcase that at the combine. 14 assists to 5 turnovers. I think Drew talked about him in our mock. I don't know how much of a role I see for him on the Hornets next season. Maybe he'll get some backup at the 1 or the 2. I think he'll probably play a lot more in the G League just to, get used to the pro game and playing as a point guard. But overall, I think it was a good draft for the Hornets, especially the value, as Rich put on our notes here, for Nick Smith Jr. at 27, Bailey at 41. So I originally had him at a B- just because they didn't really address shooting, but then I bumped that up to a B+, and I'd just like to hear what you guys think.
I'm definitely in the camp that they should probably be in the A- category.
I was thinking A-, yeah.
Because I don't dislike Scoot, but I think I don't know how big the gap between Miller and Scoot really, really was. And Miller addresses more of a position of need. Nick Smith is a steal at 27. He didn't kill it, but we Jackson, you're right. I think most people had him in the top, probably 5 or 7 in most drafts. I don't know a lot about James Nanji, so I can't really comment there. But I also
wait,
Bailey
rewind.
guy.
What do you mean top 5 or 7? Overall players?
I thought Nick Smith was in the top 5 to 7 in a lot
he
of
was
mocks.
as a recruit. He was the number 3. It was Lively, Whitehead, then him.
No, I'm talking about like
However,
coming
coming in, yes, but the collective opinion as the season wore on, when we by draft time, he was in between 15 and 20, I'd say.
Sure, but I think like if we're going to give credit for snagging a Tariq Whitehead at 21.
No, I'm in agreement. I just didn't want to give the people the impression that.
Oh, yeah.
Like
we didn't have him that high. But I'm just saying, for a guy that came in with that much pedigree, kind of falls down boards, and you get him basically at the end of the first round.
At one time, he was 3rd on our draft board.
Yes.
When Whitehead got hurt, we moved Nick Smith to number 3. Then Nick Smith gets hurt, and they both end up falling.
Yeah. And then I really like Amari Bailey. I just think he's got like really solid combo guard potential. He does a lot of things well. So I think he's going to have a really solid career. So I think this is more of an A- to me. Just I think the value they got at every pick, with the exception of James. Like, I'm just not familiar with his game. Maybe 31's a good spot for him, but the other 3 picks to me are all really rock solid.
And have you seen their depth chart? I mean, the talent that's there, the potential.
If Miles Bridges ends up coming back, there's rumors that he might be requesting to be released or have.
Well, he's restricted, so that somebody's going to have to match that qualifying offer.
But yeah, if he does stick around, they have a pretty solid roster across the board.
I mean, right now, to me, Amari Bailey, Nick Smith, and Najee all project to be 3rd stringers. Those are nice 3rd stringers to have on your team. And I don't know if Najee's coming over or he's going to stay with Barca for another year. But right now, Gordon Hayward, projects as a backup. Cody Martin's coming back, and he's probably going to be the backup point guard. But now you have Bailey and Theo Maledon, if you want to, or Teo Maledon, if you want to go that direction. They might sign him to a real contract. And Teo wasn't that far removed from being I don't think he was a lottery pick, but people had him around that range, late lottery, early to mid 20s. So, and not a player that people have totally given up on yet. I think Maledon was one of the youngest guys in his draft class. So, and I think he's only like 22 or 23 now. So, yeah. I didn't mean to go on. We got 2 votes for A-, 1 vote for B+. And we have Cam and Jake.
I gotta go with a B+. For me, it's mostly the Miller pick. Like, I can agree like that Scoot and he are not that far apart talent wise, and I think ceiling wise. But I tell you, man, every time I heard Brandon Miller open his mouth in the pre-draft process, I moved him down my board.
Yeah, I hear you.
And every time I heard Scoot talk, I'm like, man, this guy's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. I think with these top draft guys, so much of it is just the mentality and the personality.
Mm-hmm.
And like, man, I would have a hard time taking Brandon Miller over Scoot. That's my personal opinion. That kind of pushes it down to a B+ for me. Also, the Najee pick, they've got a bunch of big guys with potential already.
Mark Williams, top pick last year.
And they still got Kai Jones dunking around the G League.
Oh, come on. Kai Jones. Just go to Europe and get it over with, Kai.
I had to bring him up just for you, Rich. But they've got that center talent. I don't see, I mean, they moved a couple of guys to get him. They moved Colby Jones and Gay, who ended up getting flipped again.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about that trade. I think Boston got the better end of it.
They totally did. So, I mean, they got some talent in. It's going to help out their roster. I think a B+. They're right on the borderline for me.
I look at Jake, and he almost looks scared to make this final vote. He doesn't know what to do. He's so tense.
I'm not. I'm going to go B+ because it was a Miller pick for me too. I thought I would have taken Scoot there. And of all the top 5 picks, I think if there's going to be a bust or there's a guy with the biggest bust potential, I think it's Brandon Miller. So for that reason, I'm gonna say B+. It was a good draft. I love like the Amari Bailey Knicks. I had Nick Smith to the Nets. I mocked him at 21 to the Nets, and I thought that was really good value there. And for him to almost fall into the second round, I thought it was terrific. So the Amari Bailey pick, the Nick Smith pick, awesome value. I would have taken Scoot Henderson over Brandon Miller personally, though. So for that, I'll give it a B+.
I think the Thompson twins are more likely to be bigger busts, of anybody in the top 10. But those guys are my picks, especially Amon.
I don't know about that. I really like that.
I know. We've had the discussion. I suppose you like Kobe Brown and Kai Jones too. But anyway, I will say about Miller, I don't think he's bright. I just don't think he's bright.
I mean, that's not a hot take, Rich. He said that Paul George was the GOAT.
Right. But I've been saying that ever since the incident, the murder incident. I said the best thing you could say about this guy at this point is he's not bright. That's the best thing you can say. I mean, I was really upset by that thing. And the only reason, and I said if there were any ties, he was going to lose on my draft board. But to me, the way Scoot played this year, the way Miller played this year, yeah, I know Scoot's is a year younger, so he's got that going for him. But I watched them both, and Miller just was the better player. And he doesn't have a perfect game. I never said this all throughout the whole year, but I think this is a crap draft class. I really do. I think, if Amon Thompson is, the fifth or fourth best player and Cason Wallace is the 10th best player, you got troubles. And there's so many players in this draft that I'm thinking, man, I just don't think he's going to make it, or he's not going to be great. But anyway, we'll move on. Hopefully we can be briefer with the Bulls, who came into the draft with no picks, left with one solid pick and left with one solid undrafted free agent. Go ahead, Jackson.
Oh yeah, so they traded didn't have any picks. They traded 2 second rounders to get the 35th pick, and with that they picked Julian Phillips, which I think is more of upside pick, good early second round to he was former McDonald's All-American. Didn't really show anything on offense at Tennessee, but I think he has good potential with his athleticism and defense. So I think it's a good pick, but I mean, the Bulls are kind of stuck in mediocrity, so I would say it's good for them to look towards a guy that they could develop, but I wouldn't say it's anything that's going to help them now in the future. I think they're just going to be mid again. But then they also picked up Adama Sanogo from UConn, which I think is a nice signing. Won the NCAA championship there. I think he's a good inside presence, big, strong guy. I think he projected to be a second round pick, so I think it's a good signing. But I don't know. The Bulls did, I think, the bare minimum here, getting a early second round pick and getting a guy that has nice potential. And so I gave him a C, but I could put him lower. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe a little lower. I mean, I really do like Jalen Phillips. I don't know what the demand was for him. We probably had him ranked higher than any other draft board that that was published. So maybe we were on the right track and other teams, were looking to get him. But on most draft boards collectively, he was projecting mid second round, maybe late second round. So 2 picks for him. I think, it probably was worth it. But, some people might say, I don't know if 2 picks for one was a good idea. I'm not big on Sanogo. I know a lot of people are. So yeah, I think, they deserve probably a C minus, maybe a D plus, but what's anybody else think?
Just to update you guys, the Bulls have already signed 2 players in free agency. They just signed Javon Carter to a 3-year, $20 million deal.
Okay.
And Kobe White is back for a Cam, did you see that one by any chance?
No. I heard Kobe White.
He's
was
back
coming.
for 33, 3 for 33,
Yeah,
but they
3 for
also extended Vucevic.
Right.
That happened
Yeah.
a little bit earlier in the week.
Right. Yeah.
To me, this is a D. They might be slipping down into F territory. They're going to have one of the highest paid rosters in the NBA next year. They're like right there at the second apron with these 2 re-signings, which I think is insane for that roster, especially given that, Lonzo Ball is probably, more than likely never going to play basketball again with his injury. This is a team that's going absolutely nowhere. It's time for a teardown to me. I like the Phillips pickup. I think it's good value at 35. Getting Sonogo as an undrafted free agent, awesome. Maybe that's just enough to keep them out of F for me. But man, I just don't know what.
I'm on that D minus edge. I'm like they are one bad move away. Like not even bad. They're just one like mediocre move away from being an F because it's like I don't. You're re-signing guys. You're trying to run back this same team that was not very good. They're all going to be a year older. You added no real support in the draft. I'm at D minus personally. D maybe, but
well, I think you got to think that what could they have done at 35? What could they have done better?
Yeah, I don't know. I just maybe blow it up.
Andre Jackson is about the only thing I would think of that they could have done.
I think I just would have been looked to them, honestly, at this point to rip that Band-Aid off and start moving guys. You're doubling down on this roster. Levine and DeRozan.
Well, here's the thing about taking Andre Jackson is you could then trade. Who's the guy that used to play for the Lakers?
Caruso.
Yeah.
Caruso. Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily be interested in bringing back Beverly, and you could possibly trade Caruso. Andre Jackson could fill their role. And also help offset the loss of Ball. So, I don't know. What do you think, Jake? We're throwing around anywhere from C to F.
Yeah, I think I'm probably right smack in the middle. Just going to give him a D. I don't. Again, like you have a good point, Rich. Like I don't know. I'm a big Andre Jackson fan. I would have even advocated for him being a late first round pick. But I don't really know what they're supposed to do there to like drastically improve the roster, and to take an upside swing. Like, okay, you signed Javon Carter, you have all these guys you're paying that are going to play. I don't think maybe it's not it's not a bad move at all to take somebody who's not maybe will have to play in the G League or is going to have to develop a little bit. But I don't think you're going to get a real impact at 35, and then they paid like a bit of a price to get in there. So I would probably just give it a solid D.
All right.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think if we're looking at just the draft, I have no problem even being up into that C range. But if we're taking the draft plus the moves they are now making, it's like you've done nothing to improve. And
we'll get into that more next week.
Yeah.
But what's that, Mookie? Mookie says D plus. D plus it is.
And then just for whoever has the Cavs, they also did just sign Max Strus. So whoever's up next, they signed Max Strus.
Okay.
4 years, $64 million.
Okay. Good to know. And that's me. I was originally a Booney team, but I'm taking over Booney's team. So, the Cavs use their only pick on Amoni Bates, who's basically all offense, no defense. One of the better big shooters in the draft. Certainly gives them a promising wing to develop. They also signed undrafted point guard Craig Porter out of Wichita State. Very underrated player, very athletic, very quick, but he's also very small. So they really didn't do anything to improve their playoff chances for next season. And I think, I wrote this, earlier before the Strus signing, but I basically said this team needs depth everywhere. I still think even with Strus, they still need some more depth. In fact, Strus would have probably been the last type of player I would sign. Think about that. Look, if they do have depth in one area, it's probably at the wing, if you want to count Donovan Mitchell as a shooting guard, then you have Sam Merrill, you have Isaac Okoro, you have Chetty Osman, and now you have Bates. So what they don't really have is a real true backup forward. They don't really have a true backup center, and they don't really have a true backup point guard because Ricky Rubio's on his last leg. So yeah, Max Strus is not the guy I would have signed for this club. I guess they have no faith in their draft pick of Bates, or they have no faith in Merrill, a player I always liked. I never thought he was going to be a star, but I thought he'd be a good role player. So I gave him a D. We'll talk more about the Strus signing next week, but just given what they did, not counting Strus, I'm giving them a D, and I'm probably being generous there. What do you guys think?
I'll agree. And that's because, although again, it's pick 49 of 58, how much of an impact are you getting? Like, there's serious boom and serious bust potential here. So, like, to take a swing like that, totally all right with it. But to be honest with you, I don't see him sticking, because if you're just going to be lousy on the defensive end and not care, and the shots aren't falling, like, and he, he still is a lot, like he's not a very strong guy. He's a very slender guy. The shot making, look, it's damn impressive at times. It makes your jaw drop. But if you're not even going to care on the other end, and that ends up being your demise, like, what if he's just not even an NBA player? Like, you could have just picked a guy who maybe doesn't stick, like, whatsoever. Right. So it's a big, at 49, look, swing for the fence. Swing for the fence, do it. But you could also, the downside is, you could have a guy who legitimately doesn't crack the rotation at all, doesn't get out of the G League. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm going to, with a D, like I said, I think I'm being generous just looking at the draft. But you throw Strus in there, and it doesn't really move me that much.
What about, does Georges Niang move you at all? Because he just signed there for 3 years, too.
What are they doing? They're going to have, what are they going to put out? A bunch of 6'6" players, that can shoot and can't play.
Are we only grading solely on the draft picks, or are we also going to be throwing in some of this free agent stuff here?
The grades that we have here in the script are solely based on free agency. We could talk a little bit about it, but then we're getting into what we're going to talk about next week. But again, those don't move the needle for me. So let's just base it without Strus, without Niang. I say D, and I think I'm being generous. You had something to add, Jake?
No, I just wanted to say that I hate to have to do this and maybe rush, but like, we are only talking about the 49th pick when Kyrie just signed a massive 3-year contract, and we're about to talk about the Mavericks. So I just thought, why don't we do that?
All right, let's move on. So we'll revisit the Cavs next week, since they're definitely
we're talking about 49th overall pick.
Huh?
I don't mean to do that, but he just signed a 3-year, $126 million contract.
Wow.
And I saw the Mavericks were up next, so I wanted to put that out there. So,
oh my God, that is insane.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Wow. Some teams just have no clue. All right. So without considering Kyrie, I mean, you're welcome to talk about it, but let's keep the grades to what they've done up before today, and then we can weave that in, but let's stick to our grading to what they did up to this point, and then we'll regrade next week. All right, Cam, you had Dallas, who was pretty active during the draft, and apparently just gave away $126 million.
Yeah, this I have a feeling that this grade's not going to remain as high as it is for long. Man, okay. I ended up giving them an A- for their performance on draft night. My feeling there is, they were this close to having nothing in the draft. They, of course, they made the decision to sort of tank the rest of the NBA season, miss the playoffs entirely for just a chance at keeping that number 10 pick. And they ended up doing some pretty cool stuff with it. They ended up drafting Case and Wallace at that pick, trading that away. And in return, picking up Derek Lively, and also moving off of the Davis Bertans contract, which was really huge for them. a pretty big number for a guy that wasn't giving them a whole lot of minutes. And they actually took, we have it in our notes here that we weren't quite sure yet what they got back in return, or what the Kings got back for the Richaun Holmes deal. They actually got a $17 million trade exception in return. So they
don't you have to get something?
That's what they got, is the trade exception, basically.
But don't they have to like at least give them like a dollar bill or something to make the trade?
They got monopoly money. That's
No,
what
but
that's
I'm
what
saying
trade
technically,
exception is.
don't you have to? Doesn't a trade have to involve both parties getting something? And the trade exception would come along whether they got $1 in cash or $1 million in cash.
Yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on how the rules work here, but as far as I can tell, what they get back in return is basically the trade exception.
Okay.
Right? They basically empty the cap that was Richaun Holmes and replace it with the ghost of Davis Bertans. Right? So with that Richaun Holmes trade, they actually brought in a pick with it, which was the number 24 pick, turned into Olivier Maxence Prosper, really nice wing prospect, some 3-and-D potential there. A guy that you can see long-term developing into somebody like a Dorian Finney-Smith, who they were sorely missing last year. And of course, with that number 12 pick, they pick up Derek Lively, another promising center prospect, somebody that's going to be able to play pick and roll with Luka, and presumably Kyrie Irving. Outside of that, they picked up Mike Miles as an undrafted free agent. I think that's a pretty nice value, a guy who really knows how to play, has to make some improvements, but a really solid college basketball player that I think his offensive skills can translate. I like, especially with the perspective of they had basically the chance of nothing coming into this draft, and they come away with this much talent. I love it. The one thing that gets me, I feel like at 12, they could have gone in a different direction from Lively, especially knowing that they're bringing in Holmes. They've still got Maxi Kleber on contract. I believe they still have JaVale McGee on contract. And then, of course, Christian Wood, Dwight Powell in free agency. This is a team with a ton of front court guys and really not a whole lot at the wing outside of Luka. So I would have liked to see them maybe go wing, shooting guard, more of a guard type prospect. But what do you guys think?
I thought Lively was perfect for them. I thought it was genius. Yeah, because all the other guys are stiffs, and they've been using stiffs forever and gotten nowhere. And none of them really can play defense. So for me, this is like, okay, you got your center. He's going to do exactly what you need him to do. And who knows, maybe he will get a jump shot down the road. He's only 19 years old. So, but you don't need him. You don't need him for that. You need him for shot blocking and rim running, pick and roll. So I thought it was perfect. And to move down 2 spots and get rid of Bertans' salary, I thought that was well done. I wasn't crazy about Prosper because I thought that was a little early to me. I mean, the guy's really never, ever had an excellent college season. The only thing he did was, his metrics come out pretty well. And he performed really, really well at the combine. But had he had a mediocre combine, what would you say about this guy? He wasn't a star in college. To me, that he's just like a project. He's going to be a project. And yeah, that's the pick I didn't like. A-, I think the worst I would give him is B+. So I have no problem with A-. Anybody else? All right. So, and of course, that Kyrie thing we'll get into next week, but I don't think anyone here is a fan of that. All right. So now we have Cam on the Nuggets, who really perplexed me with their draft.
Yeah, man, Rich, I had a hard time. I mean, I couldn't even come to like a projected grade for them. It really comes down to how you see the guys that they picked up, and whether or not you think, they're prepared role players. Because again, this is a team they're not drafting they're not necessarily drafting for upside. They're looking for a guy that's going to be able to, play through their rookie scale contract as a rotation player. So I ended up going with either a B minus, C plus range. The really perplexing pick for me is Strother. I think that 29 it's really high for him. I mean, obviously he was a lot lower on our board, a lot lower in our mock draft. I mean, arguably a guy that could have gone undrafted if we were running the NBA.
Pickett and Tyson didn't get picked in our mock draft.
Yep, right.
Now, I had Tyson. I had on the mock draft I do for the site that I do myself. I had Tyson being one of the last picks. I was much higher on Tyson than most people, but not as high as the Nuggets were.
Yeah, seriously. So, I mean, in hindsight, I hadn't done my homework on Hunter Tyson. I really like that pick.
Yeah.
The analytics on him are
he's the
awesome.
one guy I think will stick.
I agree with you. Yeah. I can see Strother as a little bit of a project. He also kind of fills a need. I just saw that they re-signed Reggie Jackson, but keeping that out of this, they're looking for a guy that can maybe play backup point down the line.
They desperately need that. Now, of course, they also have Colin Gillespie, on the extended qualifying offer. He couldn't play last year because of injury, so he's another option. He was on a two-way, and they could sign him for minimal dollars.
Yeah. But yeah, I think with them, I think it's a issue of picking guys a little bit too early, right? Pickett, I can see the vision with Pickett in terms of the Denver offense. He's a good passer. He can shoot threes. He had some really shining moments in college this past year, especially. He had that 40-plus game against, I believe it was Syracuse. Either way.
No, I think he did that in Big Ten action. I think he may have done it against Indiana.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact team. I know it was a 40-plus number. I saw that game. Yeah. To me, the thing that kind of maybe pushes it into B minus range.
Illinois.
I think
it was Illinois.
It was Illinois. I knew it was orange. I couldn't think of who it was. It was definitely Illinois. The thing that pushes it to B minus for me, they didn't really have any draft capital coming in, and they made some really savvy moves to get into the draft just for an opportunity to pick these guys up. So to me, that pushes it in the B minus range. You can clearly see that they're thinking about the new CBA. They know how important it's going to be to have these rookie scale guys, especially with some other things that are happening in free agency. They're going to need that depth, especially since they're kind of capped out with the guys that they have signed. So, I mean, I'd like to hear what you guys think. I love the Tyson pick. I agree with you, Rich.
Do we know what, because to me, that's trade with Oklahoma City, where they got pick 37. They got the least favorable of one of the Thunder's first round picks and the least favorable of one of the Thunder's second round picks. Now, these are other teams' picks they're collecting. Well, actually, the first rounder includes OKC. But I didn't understand it. How do you get an early second rounder, of a first rounder, and a second rounder, for a 2029 first rounder that apparently is protected? Do we know how far it's protected?
We don't.
But I tried to figure it out.
To me, they fleeced OKC right there.
So part of it, I think, is OKC just has so many picks.
They're just giving them away.
Right? Well, they might have had a guy at that range that either they really wanted or somebody else really wanted so that they could flip it. Right? That happens in the draft sometimes. You kind of know where guys are going. There's only a handful of teams that are really quiet about who they really want. And so that might have just been some maneuvering. And
Yeah,
also,
but how
you know,
much
they
does it
can't- they
protected?
can't
How much
roster-
does Denver's 2029 protected first rounder? How much is that worth?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, OKC can't roster all these picks. So at some point, they're going to have to move them.
Right.
And I
but
think
given
they
a-
like the core they have. You know, move some of these picks
All right.
out.
I get it. Yeah. So what's everybody else think about this? When I mentioned about and I'm talking to Jake more than anybody. Think about this, Jake. Colin Gillespie, before he got hurt, so he was 100% healthy, goes in last year's draft, does not get drafted. All right. Then he gets hurt afterwards. Gets signed to a two-way by Denver. He's actually one of the first players signed in the two ways.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Pickett this year goes 32. Now compare Pickett and Gillespie. Compare them. Think about their college careers. They're somewhat different, but a lot similar. And Gillespie, I would say, is a lot better playmaker and a lot better shooter. And he was going undrafted. Pickett goes 32. So either this draft class is really weak or Denver's out of their freaking mind.
So here's the thing. I get what you're saying. I do think Pickett is still a very, very good playmaker. But I'm gonna actually go with a B- here, and I see Cam's got B-, C+. I'm gonna go B-, and he makes a really good point about the rookie scale guys. And they got 3 rookie scale guys that are going to help them out. I think part of this trade was them getting another pick because they realized they were going to lose a Bruce Brown. And they said, well, let's get some draft capital because we're strapped for money. And let's get guys that can help us right now. Fucking upside swing. We're not going for upside. We're not trying to hit a home run. Let's get 3 older guys that we don't need development and come in and help us right now. And I think their goals of going in the draft and doing that, I think they did a good job of that, and because of that, I'm going to go B- for them.
I want to interject this. I know someone high up in the Nuggets draft room. The night before the draft, when they made these moves, I suggested to him 3 players. I said, I know what you're doing. I said, you're going Andre Jackson, Trace Jackson Davis, and Vucevic, thinking not that Vucevic would start right away, but I thought the other 2 could, give you a minute or play right away. But I thought the other 2 could give you minutes right away. And this is what they could have the draft broke down, so they could have done what I just said.
Yeah.
This is what they came up with.
I would have liked to see him pick Andre Jackson.
And Trace Jackson
Davis. Him with
anybody.
I like him. I think he'll fit anywhere.
I like Trace Jackson Davis better than Strother. I like Andre Jackson better than Pickett. Hunter Tyson versus Vucevic, I like Tyson. The Vucevic might turn out to be the better long-term guy, but they're not thinking long-term, obviously.
Yeah. I that's what you're saying. Go ahead.
Yeah. I quickly wrote down the guys that, they could have had where they took Strother and Pickett. Kobe Brown, your favorite, Rich. Andre Jackson, Najee, Julian Phillips, Jordan Walsh, and I just threw in Imani Bates on there too, because obviously they could have had him. But TJD, obviously, he fell so far, but I would have taken him over plenty of those guys.
I would have taken him over any of their 3 picks.
I agree.
I would have taken Andre Jackson over any of their 3 picks.
Yeah.
Hunter Tyson's the one I like the most.
I agree. I think out of those 3 guys, I could see Hunter Tyson being a kind of home run like pick. Yeah. I think there's some serious upside there.
I think he can be Duncan Robinson with some defense and rebounding.
Oh yeah.
All right, we'll move on. But before we do that, I just want to add, I probably should have referred to my contact with the Nuggets as a former friend after what I just said. I got to tell it the way it is, man. I got to tell it the way it is. So
Hey, they're gonna know who to fire if those guys all suck.
trust me, this guy has his hands on the draft. Not the final decision maker, but he has his hands on it. So let me Bruce Brown has signed. What's the news?
Pacers, right? Shoot. I know the number. I can't remember.
2 years, 54 mil, I believe.
And it is with the Pacers, right?
And
I'm
it's with
not-
the Pacers. Yeah, that is with the Pacers.
Huge number.
Wow. So
Things
I guess he's tired of winning titles.
I'd be tired of it too for $22 million a year.
Well, what were the Nuggets going to pay him?
8 max.
Seriously?
It would have. That's all they could afford.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I guess that's a no-brainer.
Mhm.
I think he might sign with a better team. As much as I like the direction the Pacers are going, I still think they're a ways away. All right, so let's move on. One of Booney's teams was the Detroit Pistons. They came away with Oscar Thompson at number 5, Marcus Sasser at 25, and they also signed undrafted Tosan Awoma out of Princeton. With Cam Whitmore's stock falling, Detroit went with Thompson. I think considering, the guy's 20 years old and the highest level he's played at is overtime elite, you could consider him just as risky as Cam Whitmore, who we'll talk about later when we get to the Rockets. And then later, the Pistons gave up 3 second-round picks, 31, and 2 others in the future that should be high second-round picks to get Sasser at 25. I thought Sasser was a mid to early second-round pick. He's older. He's small. He's not overly athletic. He's good. He's a solid defender, but he's limited based on his size. And he's also not super athletic. But he's a great shooter. But yeah, I don't see Marcus Sasser being a 25th overall pick. So and then you consider, Killian Hayes, showed some signs of life. So you're ready to give up on him and replace him with Sasser? I don't know. I just didn't make any sense. And then today, which we'll talk about more next week, they traded for Joe Harris. Apparently for basically nothing. They're getting him for from Brooklyn. Brooklyn wanted cap relief. So I think this probably means the Pistons aren't going to be a big player in free agency. Their roster looks pretty set. And now it's basically time for the youngsters to develop and start coming through. So ultimately, I gave them, not counting the Harris move, I gave them a solid B. But, I thought, having 2 first-rounders, they had a chance to get an A. I just wasn't crazy about the 2 guys they selected. Anybody else?
I think the Thompson twins, man, they're gonna make or break overtime elite's reputation. I mean,
Yeah,
they're great kids, and I really enjoyed seeing they've been doing NBA draft trip. They're definitely basketball guys. They love the NBA, they love the game of basketball. They seem like really good dudes. So I don't wish ill, but I mean, we're talking about 20-year-olds who were playing in a league where guys are 16 and they're not really structured basketball. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm just thinking,
the best you could call that league is high school.
It's AAU
all-star. Yeah, right. AAU ball, basically.
Yeah, and I mean,
and they were,
like I said,
and as you said, they were the oldest guys around and the most physically developed guys around.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the rosters. I mean, there's guys that are playing in overtime league that are in the class of 2025, and it's you got 20-year-old class back in the class of 2025.
Oh, I thought you meant they were 25 years old. I'm like, what?
No. I'm saying those. I don't know. I have a really hard. I think B's fine. I mean, everyone seems high on the Thompson twins. Personally, I'd probably be at B- because I don't get Sasser at 25 really. But it's just gonna be really interesting because if these guys do not work out, I think overtime elite's reputation is in the gutter because the last crop of guys from last year are doing nothing.
Nothing.
Montero, Barlow, all those guys aren't doing anything. So we'll see.
Well,
I just think
Montero's doing what he did before. He's playing well in Spain.
He's playing well in Spain. I'm talking about NBA though. As a pipeline to the NBA is what they're pitching this dream as. I don't know. So I might be in the B- camp just because there's an unknown there, but maybe they prove me wrong.
Anybody else?
Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, okay. I will say between the Thompson twins, I think Asar has the higher floor.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think he might actually be my preferred twin, just because I think his jump shot's not
Oh,
nearly as broken as his
It's not.
brother's.
It's not.
Factual,
It's just-
very factual.
Yeah.
Amon's jump shot is just gross.
Yeah.
And Asar, like, the numbers back it up. Like,
And
it also just looks better.
It looks
like
better, and toward the end of the season, the numbers don't really tell the whole story, because when they were in their playoffs, he really picked it up and became, that team's go-to scorer.
Yeah, I mean, I like his upside. I don't see where he really fits roster wise with them. They're back.
Well, especially with the addition of Joe Harris.
Yeah.
I mean, I think ultimately, let me bring up their depth chart, but why can't I? Let's
Yeah,
see.
I mean,
I think they
Thompson
plan
there.
on playing him either. I guess they imagine him eventually being their starting, 3. Cunningham,
they
Ivy, and
build-
him. Huh?
Yeah, they bill the Thompson twins though as point guards, and they kind of bill themselves as point guards.
Thompson, both. Well, obviously, Amen was a point guard, and Asir can play point guard.
Yeah.
But again, that even would make their draft look worse, though. Then, if he's a point guard, why did you draft Sasser at all?
Yeah.
I think he's more like a secondary ball handler, and that's the way it's going to work out.
Mhm. Then you got Ivy there. Ivy's the same.
Right. But the lineup right now of Cunningham, Ivy, and Thompson, none of them are great shooters at all, and may never be great shooters.
I could go down to like B- range for them. I just think, when you're in this like phase of rebuild, you really got to start thinking about fit. And I can't. To me, passing on Whitmore is inexcusable for them. I think he's a perfect fit.
100% Cam. 100% agree.
At 5, like, it's the draft. Odds are you're gonna miss. And you're not gonna get the perfect guy every time. But you gotta at least go for the fit play.
Yeah.
I just think Whitmore would have been a lot better.
No, I agree.
The trade
I
makes
agree.
no sense to me.
And at least
I still see it.
and at least he's younger, and he played at college. He didn't play against a bunch of
In the best conference in college.
Yeah.
right.
And produced. His number, like, just his counting stats.
He produced even though they didn't want to give him the ball.
Yeah.
So Jake, you had some thoughts on this pick.
So I gotta say, I just wanted to focus on Sasser here. I'm actually a fan of this. I know they had to give up some seconds. They had to give up the rights to Najee to be able to get him. But you mentioned that they don't have much shooting as far as guards and like the perimeter goes. Now they got Joe Harris that we'll get to. Marcus Sasser can shoot he can shoot the rock very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually I think he's a better athlete than some people give him credit for. Like, he's got a little bit of wiggle and quickness to his handle and his game to get inside the paint. And this guy's just a winner. This Pistons team, awful the last few years. They need a winner. You need a guy who's tough as nails and is a competitor. You come off the bench, he's steady. Troy Weaver just kept saying this guy's rock solid in a lot of areas. I like the pick. I know they had to give up something to get him.
They had to give up. To give up 3 high second-round picks.
Yeah, if you like the guy,
and they took him at 25 when most people were projecting him to go somewhere between 30 and 45.
Yeah,
or 31 and 45.
These second-round pick deals like baffle my mind that you can get Sadiq Bey for like 5 of them. Like, I don't know. Like, you get a first-round pick for 3 of them. Why the fuck?
Hey!
Not. I'd like this pick. I'm a Sasser fan.
Hick's gonna get KP'd.
Do it. You should hear me on a football Sunday when the Broncos are on its worst.
All right, so we're moving on to Golden State Warriors. Drew, that was your team. What do you got? They were fairly active and fairly perplexing.
Yeah, so I ended on a C plus with room for that to be. I think that they range anywhere in the C category from minus to plus. I ended at C plus. First and foremost, this is mostly because I absolutely love getting Trace Jackson Davis at 57. I know we all relatively had him as a first round talent. I know in the show last time when we were doing the mock draft, we even discussed him maybe going at 19 when talking about guys who are ready-made players who can come in and fill. So to get him at second to last pick, I think you can make the argument it's the biggest steal and it's the greatest value pick, getting a guy that we were comfortable potentially taking at 19, getting him all the way at 57. Podziemski's a bit of a head scratcher, to be honest. I mean, he was a stat sheet stuffer at Santa Clara for a year, but when you're looking at non-Zags or even like non-Gales coming out of that conference, they're always a bit tough to evaluate, just because you have to weigh them against the level of competition they play. You have to weigh them against he's by so much of a margin the best player on that team. He kind of got to do and whatever he wanted. He was playing all the minutes, taking all the shots, had the ball in his hand the whole time. And I think the way I look at it is the Warriors just drafted their third string point guard or their fourth string shooting guard with the 19th pick. He's definitely not playing ahead of Steph or Chris Paul. He's not playing ahead of Clay. He's not playing ahead of Moses Moody. He's not playing ahead of Gary Payton. So you got a guy that's definitely not going to be, at least in my opinion, not a big rotation piece. And you passed on guys with a lot of talent on the board. I mean, you passed up on Whitmore, Sensabaugh, Clowney, Whitehead, and Murray, just to name a few. And all of those guys, in my opinion, either have higher ceilings, they fit a more pressing need, or they're a little bit of both. So I don't think Brandon's a bad player, but I just don't really get the Warriors fit, because for a team that looks like they're trying to win right now, drafting a guy who's not going to play for you, it just doesn't really make sense at 19 with the talent that was on the board. Are you
going to I mean, I would say right now, the way the roster shapes up, Jackson Davis has far better odds of playing significant minutes than Podziemski.
Oh, 100%. I think as it stands, he's going to be their first big off the bench.
Right.
So, I mean, I know free agency's in full swing, but I don't get that pick for a team that, I know they're talking, we value high IQ guys, but there were guys that I think had high IQ guys like a Chris Murray that could come play and absorb minutes and be a bigger body, which is what they need if you're going to just go for size and IQ and experience. And that he's done it at a higher level. I mean, he did it at Iowa versus doing it in the WCC. And then the big one is the Chris Paul trade. I know he's nearing the end of the line. I've warmed up to this idea, and maybe that's just delusion kicking in. I think Chris Paul or Jordan Poole and the Warriors were never going to right the ship. I think that was a divide that was too far gone. I'm not a big Poole guy. I never really have been. I know that the counting stats look great. 20 points per game, and he can hit the three, but he's really like a Walmart brand Steph Curry. That's really how he plays. He plays just as loose, just as fast, and doesn't do any of the things as well. I question his IQ, his shot selection, his defense. Maybe that's because he was so out on the team. He just wasn't giving any effort and didn't care. But those have been issues dating back to his rookie year. The one thing I like about CP is he stabilizes the second unit. I think his biggest upside is he may be able to finally unlock Kuminga, Moody, and to a degree, Trace Jackson Davis. Those guys are going to be playing with a legitimate floor general who's going to be able to set them up, get them into offense, and give those young guys, hopefully, better looks. Instead of those guys having to try to manufacture their offense, they have a Hall of Fame point guard doing it for them. I know injuries are a concern, but with the Suns, he was playing 32 minutes per game. Warriors are probably going to try to keep him in that 20 to 25. He probably will get more rest time. So the biggest thing is the Warriors, we know they play fast, they play sloppy, they play loose a lot of the time. CP can come in, slow down the game, control, calm the Warriors. And I think that's something that they need as that core gets older. They need that ability to slow down and play half-court basketball. So I'm at C+. I can go anywhere between C- and C and won't be super offended. I think Trace Jackson Davis, outstanding pick. Brandon Podziemski, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Actually, Washington drafted Trace Jackson Davis and then sent him for cash, which was undefined. So a steal nonetheless. So anyone else have thoughts on the Warriors? I think C+ is a little generous, because as much as I don't like Jordan Poole for all the reasons Drew said, I still think they probably could have gotten probably paid a little less. But that first round pick they sent is top 20 protected. So Yeah, that's not too bad. Also, did we announce on the show that Draymond Green did resign?
Yeah.
What was the amount in terms of that?
4 years, 25 million. Fourth year is a player option, I believe. So actually, they're paying.
He's only getting paid 25 million
A year.
a year.
Oh, I was
Sorry.
gonna say.
Sorry. So it's 100 million total. 100 million total. 25 million a year.
That's a lot for an old guy. That's a lot.
They're pushing the chips into the middle of the table.
Yeah. So yeah, I really disliked the Podziemski move and thought they gave up a little too much for Chris Paul. But I get it. So
Like I said, we went down to C minus. I wouldn't even be offended.
C minus is what I would be thinking, but C plus I could live with as well. Anybody else?
Man, but getting Trace Jackson Davis at 57.
That was the big catalyst for me.
Yeah, that's what moves the needle for me too.
I can't move him. I think they had some fit issues with Jordan Poole. And
yeah,
they're not getting much out of
Baldwin. Have
Baldwin.
fit issues with someone who thinks they're better than they are and plays defense when they want to and doesn't listen to anybody about shot selection.
Yeah.
Somebody like that should be punched in the mouth. Oh, wait, that happened.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, they paid the bad guy in that situation, not him. And then they're moving Baldwin. We didn't even like him in the draft. I'm sure they don't love him now. Rollins I kind of like, but they're moving to first. That's 20 protected and a second round pick, and they're getting Chris Paul to be their backup point guard. That's a great deal to me.
I don't know.
I think it's worth it.
I don't know.
I don't think the Pool. I don't think
between Baldwin, Rollins, that first round pick and that second round pick, Washington's probably going to get a real good player out of one of those things.
Yeah, but so is Golden State. I mean, they're
going to get a really good player for maybe 2 years.
That's fine. They don't care about 2 years from now.
They want to win one.
They don't.
Yeah, they win one in the next two. They're happy. It's worth it in their minds.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'll tell you what. They must not think much of Baldwin or Rollins. I mean, they took Baldwin in the first round last year. They took Rollins in the middle of the second round last year.
I think Rollins
and they overpaid for Paul. These are all moves by the past administration. What's the golden boy of GMs? Bob
Myers.
Yeah, Bob Myers. But apparently Dunleavy didn't agree with these things.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think Podziemski's a little early, but getting TJD that late, that's insane. Right. I mean, he's borderline lottery value at a point where he might as well be undrafted. And now they're going to be able to keep him on a rookie scale contract for years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge get.
That's why guys at the end of the second round sometimes would prefer to go undrafted because they have more control over their destiny and guaranteed money.
Yeah. I mean, that's an incredible pick to me. I could move him into B.
Wow.
I really could.
Wow.
I think and this is what Chris Paul should be doing. He should be a backup point guard.
I agree.
It's perfect.
I agree.
He gives them 10 points, 4 assists a game. He's not going to turn the ball over. And like I said, I think the big thing for me is if he can help those young guys really start to evolve, because it's very clear Moody and Kuminga are not ready to generate their own offense, be their own players. Who better to set them up than Chris Paul, who did average 14 and like 8.5 this year? Like, he was still a good player. It's just you're asking a 38-year-old guy to play 32 minutes a night.
This is the first true point guard Golden State's had in a long time.
Long time. So I think that it's a gamble, but it's the type of move that if it works perfectly, you don't just get Chris Paul, you get the best versions of Moody and Kuminga we've seen yet. But it has to work, and he has to stay healthy.
Right. All right, we'll leave it a C+.
Yeah.
All righty, we're going to stop right there. but yet we're not done. We're splitting things into 2 episodes this week. So basically, we're gonna take a short break, then we'll be back, and we're gonna finish up the draft grades and the free agency talk with the remaining teams that we haven't covered in this episode. So there's going to be a part 1, part 2. So if you want to catch all the teams, make sure you listen to both. Any final words, Jake?
Nope. Let's talk some draft.
All right.